Welcome to Human Monsters. How does the overall outlook on crime in New Zealand appear at this point in history? Not nearly as sweet as a kiwi fruit. Fairly grim, actually, considering that the rates of crime have seen an increase. The following is a report published by justice.government.nz. Published by the Ministry of Justice today, the NZCVS is based on interviews with more than 7,100 New Zealanders between November 2022 and October 2023. It shows 32% of New Zealanders experienced crime in the 12 months before the interview, compared to 31% in 2022. This overall figure has been relatively stable since the survey began in 2018, says Ministry of Justice General Manager Sector Insights Rebecca Parrish. Overall, the NZCVS found that New Zealanders experienced 1.88 million incidents of crime in the 12-month period. Ms. Parrish says the key finding in the survey was that, for most crimes, the number of victims is consistent with previous years, but there was an increase in fraud and vehicle theft. Last year, we reported a major increase in the rate of people victimized by fraud. This trend continued in 2023, with 10% of New Zealanders experiencing fraud in the last 12 months, Parrish says. This makes it the most common offense in New Zealand. Most fraud was identified by unauthorized bank transactions, 66%, followed by scam online purchases, 20%. The increase is a worldwide trend and is likely related to people carrying out more financial activity online, especially online shopping. Vehicle theft increased 47% from around 41,000 households in 2022 to around 60,000 households. Again, this mirrors a global trend, says Ms. Parrish. The survey showed that most vehicles were stolen from the street or driveways. They were less likely to be stolen if parked in a garage, carport, or public car park. In 2023, 185,000 New Zealanders were victims of a violent crime. Violent crime includes physical and sexual assault and robbery. The government has set a target of less violent crime, with 20,000 fewer people the victims of assaults, robberies, and sexual assaults by 2029. The NZCVS will be used to monitor progress towards this target, with an update expected in August. The proportion of victims reporting to police has remained steady since the survey began in 2018. However, in contrast to the number of victims, last year we observed a higher proportion of household incidents, burglary, theft, and vehicle theft reported to police. Across all crimes, 28% of all incidents were reported to police. Ms. Parrish says, overall, the most common reason that people give for not reporting is that they think the incident is too trivial to be worth reporting, 38%. Vehicle offenses, 58%, interpersonal violence, 40%, and burglary, 43%, are the most commonly reported crimes. Fraud and cybercrime is the least reported at 11%. Other key findings. In 2023, more New Zealanders felt unsafe compared to 2018, particularly those aged 30 and older, Asian adults, and people living in Auckland or Waikato. The number of people experiencing family offenses has decreased from 87,000 people to 70,000 people since the survey began in 2018. This is driven by a decrease in the number of offenses committed by family members who are not an intimate partner, example, parents, children, or other family relationships. The proportion of Maori adults experiencing crime each year has been decreasing since the survey began, from 39% in 2018 to 34% in 2023. The proportion of Asian adults experiencing crime has increased from 24% in 2018 to 30% in 2023. This has been driven by a rise in fraud and deception. In this episode, we explore horrific crimes that were committed in New Zealand. Normally, when you think of New Zealand, you think of, as I said, Kiwis, vaguely British accents, and Lord of the Rings. You likely haven't heard of the following true crime cases. Well, now you have. From what I can tell from researching this episode, when someone in New Zealand finds themselves in a homicidal mood, they murder in bulk. This episode is dedicated to a special Kiwi by the name of Kel Thompson. This episode was her idea. And by the way, I'm not familiar with the pronunciations of many of the words that are part of the Maori lexicon. So if I mispronounce something, it's not willful, it's out of pure ignorance. Aramoana Massacre. The Aramoana Massacre was a mass shooting that occurred on November 13th, 1990. It took place on the small seaside township of Aramoana. A man named David Gray slaughtered 13 people. David Gray was born on November 20th, 1956. At the time of his death, he was unemployed. He was born in Dunedin and raised in Port Chalmers. His classmates remembered him as quiet and unassuming, and that, quote, there was nothing frightening about him then. He had been a loner since elementary school. He worked intermittently as a farmhand in his adult years, but was unemployed for a few years preceding his death. A clerk who worked at a bookstore said that David frequently purchased books about the military and read Soldier of Fortune magazine. One day he threatened an employee of that store with what appeared to be a shotgun concealed in a cardboard box. He was served with a trespass notice. His sister said he was an animal lover. Neighbors said this was a source of conflict with Gary Holden, whose pets were always dying. Friends noticed a decline in the state of Gray's mental health during the months leading up to the massacre. His behavior was so belligerent, he alienated his friends. On November 13th, he became hostile toward a bank teller because he was angry about a $2 fee that was to be charged for processing a check. From there, he went to a gun store to place a $100 deposit as layaway on a gun he would pick up the following week. He went from there to Continental Coffee Bar. He had a cold pie and soon became confrontational. When he was asked to leave, he threatened the owners by saying, "I'll be back. I'm going to get you. I'll blow you away." If he had left it at, "I'll be back," they could have laughed it off, assuming it was an unfunny and unconvincing Schwarzenegger impression. Unfortunately, this was no laughing matter. At the time, it was the deadliest mass shooting in New Zealand's history. The incident inspired the government to make radical changes to the country's firearm legislation in 1992. Among the new regulations were 10-year photographic licenses and tight controls on military-style semi-automatics. The incident began at 7:30 p.m. Gray confronted his neighbor, Gary Holden, because his daughter had wandered onto Gray's property. Following their heated argument, Gray went back in his house and took up his Norinco 84S semi-automatic rifle. He went back outside and shot Holden several times in his chest. He finished up by walking up to him and shooting him in the head. 3 young girls were standing nearby. 2 of them were Holden's daughters, Jasmine and Chiquita. The third was his girlfriend, Julie Ann Bryson's daughter, Rewa. The girls ran inside Holden's house to seek refuge. This did not stop Gray. He ventured into Holden's house and found Chiquita, whereupon he shot her in the arm and chest with a Squires and Bingham Model 16-22 caliber semi-automatic sporting rifle. 1 bullet was fired into her abdomen. Subsequent to this, Gray tracked the other girls down and murdered them. Chiquita survived her injuries and ran out the back door and past her father's dead body and sought refuge in Julie Bryson's house. Meanwhile, David Gray set Holden's house on fire. Gray went on a rampage, shooting at anybody who was unfortunate enough to emerge in his crosshairs. He opened fire on a utility van which was full of passengers who stopped by the Holden house, which was still ablaze, to see if they could be of assistance. He shot Vanessa Percy multiple times in the back as she fled from the scene, terrified. She died hours later at the scene. Gray turned to 3 children. He killed 2 boys, Leo Wilson and Dion Percy. Their sister Stacy survived a bullet she caught in her abdomen. Ross Percy, hers and Dion's father, was shot in the head and perished shortly thereafter. Alexei Talley was murdered. Gray entered the home of Tim Jameson. He killed him and an elderly man who lived in the neighborhood, him being the former mayor of Green Island, Vic Crimp. The next to find himself in Gray's firing line was James Dickason, who was out looking for his dog. Ava Helen Dickason, James's mother, and a neighbor named Chris Cole went to the street to see what the commotion was about. Gray wounded Cole as he alerted first responders from a phone booth. Mrs. Dickason dived for cover. She was unable to walk without assistance due to a hip replacement procedure. She crawled along the ground on her stomach to get to a ditch. She managed to get inside her house and call 111, the New Zealand equivalent of 911. She crawled back to Cole to tell him help was on the way. She was advised by a 111 dispatcher to stay inside. Mrs. Dickason would later receive a George Medal for bravery. The medics arrived too late to save Cole, who passed away in hospital. Stuart Guthrie was the first police officer to arrive at the scene. He arrived with a Smith & Wesson Model 10 police revolver, though New Zealand police do not routinely carry guns. He requested assistance from Constable Russell Anderson, who arrived on the scene earlier with the fire department. He handed him a rifle that belonged to a local civilian. They went to Gray's house as dusk turned to dark. Guthrie covered the front of the house while Anderson covered the back. Detective Paul Allen Knox and 2 constables showed up. They carried out a procedure that was employed to deal with armed offenders called cordon, contain, appeal. Guthrie caught sight of Gray as he went about his business inside his house. He reported his movements to the police communications center. Eventually, Gray disappeared from view, and Guthrie advised his fellow officers to be vigilant. Anderson saw Gray depart from his house and challenged him. Gray retreated to the backyard. He concealed himself in the sand dunes on a neighbor's property. Guthrie encountered him as he came out of the darkness. He ordered Gray to surrender, and he fired a warning shot. Gray shouted, "Don't shoot!" This gave Guthrie the impression that Gray was surrendering. Gray was merely playing possum. He suddenly opened fire, landing a bullet in Guthrie's head. Guthrie died instantly. A few minutes later, the Dunedin branch of the Armed Offenders Squad arrived and sealed off the town with a roadblock about 250 meters along the only road that led out of Aramoana. They sealed off access with an armored car. Backup arrived from AOS units based in Christchurch, Timaru, and Invercargill. They had to fly to get to the scene. The situation was considered dangerous because Gray had a scope on his rifle, rendering him an effective marksman. At this point, the police ordered that Gray must be shot on sight without a warning shot. The order went, if he had a firearm, he is to be shot. Gray ate his dinner and went to sleep. At 6 a.m., the ATS arrived on Gray's street. They shot a stun grenade into his house, the impact of which was powerful enough to blow out the windows. They shot canisters of tear gas into the house. Still no David Gray. They kicked down the door. They found that the house was empty. They searched other houses in the neighborhood. They finally tracked down Gray at a house with a broken window. Gray fired back at the police as he hid behind a fibrillate shed. The police fired at the shed as Gray shot back from random spots. For 2 minutes, both sides fired. One ATS agent caught a bullet in his ankle. 5:50 p.m. Gray ran out of the house, shooting from the hip. He shouted, "Kill me! Fucking kill me, you bastards!" He advanced toward the police and was shot 5 times. He was hit in the eye, neck, chest, and twice in his crotch. Ow! Even after those injuries, he remained recalcitrant, breaking free from the plastic handcuffs with which he was restrained. He was re-handcuffed. An ambulance administered oxygen as they headed to the hospital, but he perished before they arrived. David Gray had quite the arsenal in his house. It included a .22 caliber Vickers Martini Mk2 single-shot rifle, a .22 caliber Winchester Model 750 rifle fitted with a suppressor, a Norinco SKS semi-automatic rifle, a .22 caliber Squires, a Bingham Model 16, an air rifle, hundreds of rounds of .22 ammunition, approximately 100 rounds of .223 ammunition. Gray was armed with a .22 caliber Remington Nylon 66 and .223 Norinco 84 at the time he was shot. The police fired between 50 and 60 shots. At least 150 officers were dispatched to the scene. David Gray's house was burned to the ground by authorities. It represented memories the locals and other residents would have preferred to forget. The Schlafer family murders. May 20th, 1992, Perata, region of Auckland. 64-year-old Brian Schlafer, who suffered from mental health issues such as depression, got into a heated argument with his wife in their bedroom. His rage got the better of him, and he stabbed her to death. One of their sons checked up on them to see what the fuss was about. Brian shot him. Brian proceeded from there to go to their barn, where he shot his other son. One of his son's wives appeared to investigate the situation by running from one house to another. She was shot to death on the way to the house where the original murders happened. She survived her wounds and ran to her house, where she dialed 111. Brian went to his grandson's bedroom and shot him in the bed. He went from there to the kitchen, where his son's wife was talking with the police. Brian returned to the barn, where he shot his son and waited for his other son to return from work. When he arrived, Brian shot and stabbed him. Having carried out all these murders, Brian went to some bushes next to the house and shot himself. His granddaughter survived by hiding in a wardrobe. She spoke with police after her mother was no longer able. She spoke with them for 3 hours until police established their presence at the scene. Brian was issued a license to own and use firearms in 1984, and there was no officially documented history of mental illness attributed to him. Bain family murders. To give some background to the case, Robin Irving Bain and Margaret Arawa Cullen were married. They had 4 children, David, Arawa, Lanie, and Stephen. They moved to Papua New Guinea, where Robin worked as a missionary teacher. They moved back to New Zealand in 1988. In 1991, Robin became the principal of Tairi Beach School. In June 1994, they lived at 64 Every Street, Andersons Bay, Dunedin. The house was old and described as, quote, semi-derelict. Photos had been taken before the case went to trial and revealed a domicile that was filthy and cluttered. Robin and Margaret became estranged at some point. She developed a belief system with its basis in New Age and spiritualism. She must have studied the occult too, for she referred to Robin as, quote, a son of Belial, one of the 4 crown princes of hell. They argued and bickered frequently. At one point, Margaret intimated to a friend that she would shoot Robin if she could. She wouldn't allow him to sleep in the house, so he regularly slept in the back of his van in the rear of the school. On weekends, he slept in a caravan in the back of the home. At Robin's 3rd Court of Appeal hearing, teachers who were personally acquainted with him described him as, quote, deeply depressed, to the point of impairing his ability to do his job of teaching children. A psychologist who visited the school observed that Robin, quote, appeared to be increasingly disorganized and struggling to cope. There were piles of unopened mail on his desk, and his classroom was described as disheveled, disorganized, and untidy. Lanie had been staying at an apartment in Dunedin, but she also lived with her father at the Thierry schoolhouse. She returned to the family home on Sunday, June 19th, for a family meeting. At David Bain's retrial, witnesses said the meeting was organized because Lanie, 18 at the time of the meeting, wanted to make it known that her father was committing incest with her. June 20th, 1994. David finished his newspaper delivery route and called 111 at 7:09 a.m. and said to the operator in an anguished voice, "They're all dead. They're all dead." When police arrived at the scene, they found 5 members of the family dead of gunshot wounds. Robin, 58, Margaret, 50, Arawa, 19, Lanie, 18, and Stephen, 14. A message was typed on a computer that went, "Sorry, you are the only one who deserved to stay." 4 days later, David was charged with 5 counts of murder. The house was burned down at the request of grieving relatives. Footprints were revealed when carpets were doused with luminol on the day of the murders. Police failed to cut out a section of the carpet so a bloodied footprint could be analyzed for DNA. There were appeals and retrials, but David was acquitted because of the serious possibility that Robin shot the other 4 members of his family and then committed suicide. Christchurch Mosque Massacre. Brenton Harrison Tarrant, born October 27, 1990, is a European-Australian man who grew up in New South Wales. He had a history of lurking in online communities on sites such as 4chan and 8chan, where he chatted with right-wing extremists like himself. He also cited YouTube as a significant source of information and inspiration along those lines. Starting in 2012, he traveled to many countries alone, except North Korea. He donated money to far-right groups in 2018. He moved to New Zealand in August 2017. He lived in Anderson's Bay in Dunedin until the time of the massacre. He became a member of a South Otago gun club and practiced his marksmanship at their shooting range. Tarrant began planning the massacre 2 years in advance. 3 months before the event, he chose his targets. Some survivors believed they had seen him at the mosque where they were shot. They said he pretended to pray and asked about the mosque's scheduling. Police dispute this conjecture, believing it was more likely that he viewed the Al-Noor Mosque's schedules online. He also used a drone to survey the mosque's ground on January 8, 2019. Tarrant used handguns, shotguns, and rifles for the attack. He was licensed to carry firearms. He purchased over 7,000 rounds of ammunition. The guns and magazines bore white writing indicating events, people, and themes related to historical events, wars, and battles waged between Muslims and Europeans, like the Crusades. It also bore the names of Islamic terrorists active close to the date of the massacre, their victims, and the names of radical right attackers. The phrase "remove kebab," which was a call to take action against Muslims, was included. The number 14 was incorporated, signifying the so-called 14 words, as written by far-right radical and white supremacist David Eden Lane, one of the 9 founding members of The Order, as their conglomerate was called. Their official and most often used slogan was, "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children." Secondary to this, they would say, "Because the beauty of the white Aryan woman must not perish from the earth." Tarrant wore an armored vest at the time of the attack that contained 7 loaded 223 and 5.56 magazines in the front pockets. He wore an airsoft helmet, on top of which he wore a GoPro, so he could document the massacre on video for a live stream for the benefit of right-wing radical moron spectators who might be watching. There were 4 incendiary devices found in his car by the New Zealand Defence Force, who defused them. He pointed out on the live stream that it had been his intention to set the mosque on fire. Tarrant wrote a manifesto germane to the massacre. It was entitled The Great Replacement. The Great Replacement and white genocide are conspiracy theories Tarrant believed in wholeheartedly, with critical thinking having been rejected wholesale. He emailed the manifesto to 70 recipients, among them the Prime Minister of New Zealand and major media outlets. He also shared links to Twitter and 8chan. The manifesto was also forwarded to the Parliament security team. They called the police communications center immediately at 1:40 p.m. It was about that time that the first 111 calls were made. Contained within the manifesto were anti-immigrant sentiments, hate speech with migrants at its crosshairs, typical white supremacist rhetoric, and a call for all non-white residents of Europe to be removed. On March 23, 2019, the manifesto was deemed objectionable by the chief censor of New Zealand, and possession of it became an unlawful offense. Tarrant has denied being a Nazi, describing himself as an ethno-nationalist. The following is a sample from The Great Replacement. Diversity is weak. Why is diversity said to be our greatest strength? Does anyone even ask why? It is spoken like a mantra and repeated ad infinitum. Diversity is our greatest strength. Diversity is our greatest strength. Diversity is our greatest strength. Said throughout the media, spoken by politicians, educators, and celebrities. But no one ever seems to give a reason why. What gives a nation strength? And how does diversity increase that strength? What part of diversity causes this increase in strength? No one can give an answer. Meanwhile, the diverse nations across the world are scenes of endless social, political, religious, and ethnic conflict. The United States is one of the most diverse nations on earth, and they are about an inch away from tearing each other to pieces. Brazil, with all its racial diversity, is completely fractured as a nation, where people cannot get along and separate and self-segregate whenever possible. South Africa, with all its diversity, is turning into a bloody backwater as its diversity increases. Black on other black, black on white, white on black, black on Indian, doesn't not matter. It's ethnicity versus ethnicity. They all turn on each other in the end. Why is it that what gives Western nations strength, diversity, is not what gives Eastern nations, China, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, their strength? How are they so strong, China set to be the world's most dominant nation in this century, whilst lacking diversity? Why is that their non-diverse nations do so much better than our own, and on so many different metrics? Diversity is not a strength. Unity, purpose, trust, traditions, nationalism, and racial nationalism is what provides strength. Everything else is just a catchphrase. Diversity is weakness. Unity is strength. On the day of the massacre, Tarrant parked his vehicle at 1:39 p.m. in the driveway next to the Al Noor Mosque. He armed himself with these Mossberg 930 and Wyndham weaponry AR-15 rifle. Having armed himself, he walked toward the mosque. 1:40 p.m. During his approach, a worshiper greeted him by saying, "Hello, brother." Tarrant fired his shotgun 9 times at the front doors. He killed 4 worshippers. He threw the shotgun to the ground and opened fire once inside with the AR-15. He killed 2 men in a hallway. He made his way into a prayer hall. He opened fire on dozens more worshippers after dazing them with a strobe light that was attached to the AR-15. A worshipper named Naeem Rashid tackled Tarrant and wrestled him to the floor. He knocked a magazine from Tarrant's vest. Tarrant regained his footing and got to his feet. He sprayed several bullets at Rashid, killing him instantly. Following his death, Rashid was issued medals for his bravery from Islamic officials and the New Zealand government. Positioned at close range, Tarrant fired at worshippers in the prayer hall. Tarrant went back outdoors. He killed a man and threw aside his Winham WW-15. He took up his Ruger AR-556 AR-15 from the car. He went to the mosque's southern gate and killed 2 people in the car park and wounded another worshipper. He went back in the mosque and shot people who were already wounded. He followed up by going back outside and shooting a woman who was already wounded. Once she was dead, he drove over her corpse with his car. He departed from the scene 6 minutes after his arrival. He opened fire on worshippers who were escaping from the scene 6 minutes after his arrival. He opened fire on worshippers who were escaping from the scene on foot and in cars through his windscreen and the window of his car as he made his way to the Linwood Islamic Center. Though the live feed on Facebook ended due to a connectivity issue, the GoPro continued to document the proceedings. 1:52 p.m. Tarrant arrived at Linwood Islamic Center. There were approximately 100 people inside. He parked his car in the driveway to prevent anyone from coming in or going out. He was initially unable to find the front entrance. Due to this, he began shooting people outdoors through a window. He killed 4 people, which alerted the rest of the congregation to the danger. A man named Abdulaziz Wahabzada departed from the mosque. As Tarrant was in the middle of retrieving a gun from his car, Abdul threw a payment terminal at him. Tarrant shot at him. Abdul picked up an emptied shotgun from the ground. He hid behind some cars and shouted, "I'm here!" This did not dissuade or distract Tarrant, and he entered the mosque, whereupon he killed 3 people. Tarrant returned to his car, where Abdul confronted him again. Tarrant produced a bayonet from his vest, but decided against attacking Abdul and returned to his car. He left the scene at 1:55 p.m. as Abdul threw his shotgun in the car. Abdul received the New Zealand Cross for bravery. This mosque would eventually become vacant, and it was demolished in November 2023. A unit of the police spotted a silver 2005 Subaru Outback that matched the description of Tarrant's vehicle as given by witnesses. The police searched for him at 1:57 p.m. 2 police officers rammed his car off the road. Tarrant was arrested within minutes without resistance in Sydenham at 1:59 p.m. At the time, he was headed for a mosque in Ashburton. He told the police there were 9 other shooters, though he later admitted during questioning that he acted alone. In court, formally charged with murder, Tarrant was all smiles. He put on a happy face for journalists and flashed an inverted OK gesture, which is apparently a white power signal. While he was remanded in custody, he bemoaned the fact that he was not outfitted with access to newspapers, television, internet access, visitors, or phone calls. The total number of charges was 89, 50 for murder and 39 for attempted murder, with other charges pending. He was ordered by the court to undergo a psychiatric evaluation on April 5, 2019. On May 20th, a new charge was added, engaging in a terrorist act under the Terrorism Suppression Act of 2002, an additional murder charge, an attempted murder charge, were included. August 24th, 2020. Tehran entered a guilty plea and received a life sentence for each of the casualties to be served consecutively. On September 1st, he was designated a terrorist entity. Part of this entailed that it was a criminal offense for anyone to support him financially. Delia Whitaker. March 21st, 1991. Police were notified by Nia Whitaker that she was horrified when she arrived at her home to find that her 2-year-old daughter, Delia, was dead. She told police she arrived after having been out for a couple of hours. She was remembered as being very matter-of-fact about it. An EMT named Martin Smith was dispatched to the home in the township of Mangere. He reported to the High Court that he found a severely emaciated dead toddler who was in the fetal position. All she had for a sheet was a crumpled up piece of plastic. There were extensive scars on her buttocks. The scars appeared to have been the result of burns. She also presented with burns on her feet and hands. There were bruises on the rest of her body. Before alerting police to his findings, he asked a man named Eddie Smith about the burns. Eddie said she fell into a bath, quote, 4 or 5 weeks prior to the emergency call, and that she was not taken to a doctor. When police arrived at her home, Tanya was sitting inside a patrol car with Detective Constable Caroline Fisher. Fisher was baffled and shocked by the complete lack of emotion and flat affect of Tanya. Tanya asked her for a cigarette. Initially, the police intended to charge Eddie Smith with Tanya testifying against him. Later, police charged Tanya because though they were sure that Smith had beaten the child, Tanya's failure to bring her in for medical attention contributed significantly to her death. More charges were brought against them. Willfully subjecting Delia to abuse between July and October 1990 in such a way as to cause her unnecessary suffering. Failure to provide medical treatment for the burns, thereby endangering Delia's life. Willfully abusing Delia by way of submerging her in scalding hot water. Murder. Manslaughter. Smith pleaded guilty to the first 3 charges, but not guilty of the rest. Tanya pleaded not guilty, claiming she was not responsible for her actions because she had, quote, battered woman syndrome. She claimed Eddie beat her whenever she came to Delia's aid. As for the couple's history, they met in a South Auckland bar in 1989. She was known for heavy drinking. 2 weeks after they met, Eddie began to beat her. Tanya kept a diary, and it didn't just detail the beatings. There were aspects of her life with him that she enjoyed, like beer, parties, sex, and other recreational pursuits. On February 4th, 1991, she wrote, "Sex with Eddie is great. Sometimes I have to control myself, especially if we are in bed together enjoying each other's company. With him, I can reach a fantastic orgasm that I could never, or even thought of reaching." At first, she told police that she was responsible for the physical abuse. Eddie also blamed her. When Tanya was informed that Delia had been subjected to brutal sexual abuse, she changed her tune, claiming Eddie caused the major injuries. Official reports noted that Delia's room was squalid. She was so emaciated she wore her shrunken skin and bones as the uniform of neglect. The photographs of her in that room haunted everybody who saw them. Delia was beaten in every area of the house. Her blood was spattered on the walls and the carpets. There was a puddle of blood on the mattress on which she slept. That bed was devoid of typical bed linens like a blanket and sheet. Vomit was seen on the skirting board where she had retched the night before the hour of her demise. There were injuries on her neck, indicating that the assailant had long nails and weaponized them against Delia. Some of her teeth had been knocked out. The interior of her top lip had been torn from the gum. There was extensive scarring on her scalp as a result of having her hair pulled aggressively over a period of several months. The coroner reported at the trial that the official cause of death was peritonitis. Peritonitis is the inflammation of the localized or generalized peritoneum, the lining of the inner wall of the abdomen and covering of the abdomen organs. Severe malnutrition was also cited as a contributing factor in her death. Additionally, a broken jaw and burns to 15% of her body were factored, among many other injuries. The most memorable moment of the trial was on the last day, when Whitaker claimed she went out partying with Eddie while Delia was on her deathbed because he threatened to waste her with a steel bar if she didn't accompany him. He also put a knife to her throat and threatened to kill her en route. A video happened to have been made of the party in question, and Tanya was seen having the time of her life. She was all smiles. Eddie and Tanya were both charged with manslaughter, neglect, and abuse. They were both sentenced to 16-year prison terms. Nia Glassie. Nia Glassie was 3 years old at the time of her death. She was subjected to extremely brutal abuse for weeks, though speculation has it that it went on for months. It ended on August 3rd, 2007, when she was admitted to hospital to treat a brain injury that was impervious to efforts to correct it. The abuse was doled out in many forms. Large, heavy logs of wood were dropped on her. Wrestling moves from a video game were reenacted with her. She was kicked. She was beaten. She was slapped. She was jumped on. She was held over a fire. She was spat on. She was folded into a sofa and sat on. She was shoved into piles of garbage. She was dragged through a sandpit half nude. She was thrown against a wall. She was dropped from a steep height onto the floor. She was whirled rapidly on an outdoors rotary clothesline until she was thrown off. Horrified? Wait until you hear this. For their pièce de résistance, she was placed in a clothes dryer and tumbled around inside of it at the machine's maximum heat setting for a half hour. Her mother was 34-year-old Lisa Michelle Kuka. She told the hospital staff that Nia's injuries were attributable to her falling off the shoulders of then 17-year-old Wairimu Te Aroha Te Wahanu Curtis. It came to light that her North Island family waited 36 hours before reporting to medical authorities that Nia had lapsed into a coma. Somebody was celebrating a 21st birthday, which they felt was of primary importance. Nia lay on the floor as they partied. Lisa was seen in nightclubs during Nia's hospitalization. During the trial, a doctor told the courtroom that if Nia had been brought in for treatment as soon as she fell into the coma, her life could have been saved. Lisa was found guilty of 2 counts of manslaughter, one for failing to seek medical treatment for Nia and another for her failure to protect her. Her boyfriend, Waremu Curtis, 19, and his brother Michael, 22, were found guilty of murder and sentenced to prison. Nia's cousin Michael Pearson and his girlfriend Oriwa Kemp were convicted for child cruelty. Lauren Ann Dickason. Lauren Dickason was the daughter of Malcolm and Wendy Fox. Lauren attended a boarding school in South Africa. When she was 15 years old, she began to suffer from anxiety and depression. In addition to this, she had postnatal depression. She would go on to study medicine at University of Cape Town. She became a doctor in 2004. She completed her rural health practice in Pretoria. There she met her husband, Graham Dickason, in 2005. He is an orthopedic surgeon. They got married in 2006. The couple had 3 children, Leanne and twins Maya and Kayla. Leanne was born in September 2014. Maya and Kayla were born in November 2018. After the twins were born, the couple hired a nanny named Maria Mendi Sabagnoni. She worked for them from November 2018 to May 2020. In 2015, Lauren was diagnosed with a major depression disorder with underlying anxiety. It was linked to postpartum depression due to the loss of a child named Sarah. The loss haunted Lauren frequently, manifesting in symptoms such as insomnia, crying jags, suicidal ideation, panic attacks, restlessness, numbing of the emotions, and intrusive thoughts. Not only did she suffer from anxiety and depression throughout the pregnancy with the twins, but the symptoms persisted afterwards, and the turmoil was consolidated when she learned that Kayla had a cleft palate. In May 2019, this pathology came to a head when she saw a psychiatrist about some disturbing homicidal urges when it came to her children. She said she had an episode of this pathology when she saw that Maria struggled to put the twins to bed one night. She said that Kayla was recalcitrant and that she would lash out at Lauren on occasion, even going as far as to slap and bite her. Lauren said her children were, quote, never enough. Whatever that means. By the way, as a fun little aside, I Googled the phrase, I hate my child sometimes. 191 million results. Maybe Lauren's feelings are not as uncommon as we'd like to believe. In 2019, the Dickason family decided to move to New Zealand. During the COVID lockdown, Lauren experienced anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts. However, there was an improvement in her mental state between late 2020 and June 2021. She participated in a wellness program to achieve further improvement. In July 2021, she had a relapse during the 2021 South African unrest, whose catalyst was the imprisonment of their former president, Jacob Zuma. Lauren feared for the children's safety and decided to keep them at home. Without consulting with her doctor first, she ceased the intake of her antidepressants in March 2021. She started taking them again in August 2022. It was during that time when she was entertaining thoughts of harming and killing her children like never before. She confided in Graham, who was outraged and demanded she take her antidepressant medication again. Lauren continued to experience homicidal ideation following a surgical procedure on her foot. She kept that pathology to herself as she was concerned it would affect her family's immigration. That month, Graham's essential skills work visa was approved by Immigration New Zealand. In July 2021, one of Lauren's friends sent her a TikTok video containing a poem entitled "Mom Needs a Minute." It was about the difficulties of raising children and the, quote, chaos inside of her brain. Lauren responded by saying, "Awesome, that's exactly how I feel." Lauren took to the internet for months in search of methods to provoke an overdose in her children. In August 2021, she fantasized about using cable ties to strangle her children. This after she witnessed Graham and the girls playing with cable ties in the family's garage. This happened 2 weeks before they moved to New Zealand. Lauren became withdrawn, silent almost to the point of catatonia. Crying jags became more frequent. She lost a significant amount of weight. After the family spent 2 weeks in managed isolation, the Dickason family settled in the town of Timaru. Lauren hated it there. She didn't like how the locals looked. She didn't like the rental accommodations available, describing them as small, disgusting, and creepy. She was worried that her children would be targeted for cyberbullying in the years to come. She considered the treatment of the indigenous peoples to be similar to apartheid in South Africa. She regretted moving to New Zealand. According to mental health experts, she focused on those issues to the point where they became delusions buttressed by her depression. September 16th, Kayla and Maya attended their first day of preschool. Leone attended her first day at Timaru Christian School. After Lauren picked up the girls, Kayla threw a tantrum in the car. Later that day, the family went to the local botanical gardens on a leisure visit. While there, a group of girls warned Lauren that a boy in the park was taking photographs of her children. She inferred that New Zealand was no safer than South Africa. The same day, she ruminated over brutally killing her children. She intended to accomplish this by sedating them and cutting into their femoral arteries. In the evening, Graham joined some colleagues for a night out. Lauren was alone with the children. As she told police later on, the children, quote, were being wild again, jumping on the couches, not listening to what I'm trying to tell them. She also said, something just triggered me. She said that what triggered her was a request by Immigration New Zealand for more medical data about Kayla's cleft palate and Lauren's state of mental health. She was also troubled by her feeling that she didn't have the strength to make the girls' lunches for school. Lauren gathered the girls together in one of the bedrooms, where she told them they were going to make necklaces with cable ties. She tricked them into wearing the cable ties around their necks. She said to them, "Mummy's very sick and is going to die. I can't leave you behind because I don't know who's going to look after you." She proceeded to choke the children, starting with Kayla. Leone was strangled before Maya. Lauren told police that Kayla had been really horrible to her, as she put it, as of late. She also made sure to mention that Leone fought back. She said, "The oldest one was very angry, and she wants to know why I'm doing this to them, because I'm the best mom and she loves me." The children were still breathing, so she smothered them all with a towel and their blankets. Having murdered the children, Lauren tried to kill herself with a knife and some pills. Graham found his dead children in their beds when he got home. He confronted Lauren, who simply said, "It's too late." She segged into a catatonic state. She was taken to a hospital and received treatment. Lauren confessed to murdering her children. She was treated in a psychiatric hospital. The doctors believed her condition was so severe that she could be eligible for an insanity plea. August 16th, 2023. Lauren was found guilty of murdering her children in the Christchurch High Court. It was determined that she, quote, acted methodically, purposefully, and even clinically out of anger and control. She was sentenced to 3 terms of 18 years each, to be served concurrently. Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.